It's time to chill out and get ready for a mediocre Q&A live stream. If you're old enough, grab yourself your favorite adult beverage, and if you're not, stick with apple juice. Put your feet up and relax. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. And now let's cue up the intro music. Yo, what is up, everybody? How are you doing? It's been a while, I think. I think it's been a couple weeks. I've been kind of trying to get some priorities straight and kind of figure out some weird stuff going on in my head for sure. But all is well here. I'm good as usual. Got just, random crap going around in my brain right now. Trying to figure out a way to kind of transition these live streams into something a little bit different to where it's not just a live stream every week. And I'm already working on it. Actually, next week we should have a Robbie Pointer. Thank you so very much for that super sticker that you sent on YouTube. Thank you very much, man. I really appreciate it. So we have some people watching on YouTube, on Facebook. I do have to say thank you to everybody because it's very awesome to have support from you all. It's really, really cool. Well, thank you. Thank you, Jason G. Jason G says he loves the videos and they're really instructive. That's really cool, man. I hope that some people get something out of these videos. Even if it's just don't do what that dummy did, right? Because I make a lot of mistakes. I'm just a normal person. So it's really cool. Reading through the chat right now, lots of great people, normal commenters and everything in here. It's really awesome to see all the support. Thank you so very much to everybody. If you guys are in here, whether it be on Facebook or on YouTube, do me a favor and smash the thumbs up button, whether any social media platforms. It helps me to be recognized a little bit more. There's definitely some things going on within YouTube and social media and different things like that, and I'm trying to figure them out. One of the things is when I send out the invites to these, I usually send like a little phrase with a link to YouTube. Well, I've since realized, which it totally makes sense. I used to share those in Facebook, like on my page and my profile, and then in a few groups and different things. But I've learned that Facebook doesn't like cross promotion, and neither does YouTube, neither does Instagram. So Instagram is fine to Facebook, and Facebook is fine to Instagram, obviously, because they're the same company. But when I send out a Facebook invite, responding like I usually do with a link to the live stream, what I've been noticing is that a lot of people tell me they don't get it for 3, 4, 5 days sometimes, and it makes sense. I've kind of done some research and figured out what was going on. So definitely lots of stuff to do. So what I wanted to say though is, if all goes well, I'm gonna have a really awesome friend of mine on the live stream next week, and it's going to be a little bit of a different format. So let's see how this works and what this can turn into. Should be something fun. It's a very, very good friend of mine that I respect very much, and he's just an awesome dude. So I'll give you a hint. He's one of the best educators that I've ever met. So let's just say that. All right, let's see what's going on in the chat. So as usual, if you guys have anything that you want me to cover or topics you want me to talk about, sometimes it can be really hard to see them all, but put them in caps lock. It helps me to see them. At the same time, if I miss anything, shoot me an email to hvacrvideos@gmail.com, and I'll try to get your question there too. Okay. All right, let's go through this chat right now. That is really, really cool. All right. Look, man, lots of great people in here. My buddy Pat Finley's in here. Commercial Kitchen Chronicles. Look at HVACR North, my buddy Joe. So check this out. If you guys didn't see my social media posts, I have a very, very good friend, Mr. Bill Russell, Curious HVAC guy. And he's probably my bestest friend ever, right? And I think he feels the same way too, because he got me a little keychain. And on this keychain, let's see if I can get the thing to say. Yeah, the camera's not going to pick up on that. But there's 4 puzzle pieces, and this one says best. And then there's another one that says friends. And then there's one that says for. And then there's one that says ever. Myself, Adam, Joe, and Bill all got a keychain. And Bill, this is my Christmas present. Bill sent me a yodeling pickle. I had no idea there was such thing as a yodeling pickle, but apparently there is, and Bill never disappoints with his gifts. Okay, actually, it was funny. I was going through my stuff in preparation for the show, and I found a calendar that he gave me last Christmas or the Christmas before, and it was for 2021, and it's pooping dogs. For every day of the month, it's another dog pooping. Like that's Bill. That's Bill's humor. Love the guy to death. Awesome dude. So, all right, let's see what we got going on in the chat. So have I worked on a reciprocating compressor before? Oh yeah, reciprocating compressors are very common, and it's something that they're being phased out. In fact, if you guys didn't already know, Copeland has announced that their CR, Charlie Ralph, and the Charlie Frank series reciprocating hermetic compressors are being phased out, and they are going to be replacing them permanently with scroll compressors. So they're not going to be making them anymore, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, the first part of my career was lots of reciprocating compressors. So let's see what else we got going on in here. Why? Oh, right on. Yeah. Am I finally not going to flake on Brett? No, Brett. Yeah, that's the hard thing. It's been a hard time trying to get onto Brett. So my Brett Wetzel with Advanced Refrigeration Podcast is another friend of mine. And Brett started doing a podcast with my friends, the Cooler Heads podcast. And yeah, I haven't been able to make it to that show. So, and just so that you know, I'm not flaking on Brett. Brett flakes on me. So I'm always ready. Brett's the one that just keeps telling me that I'm not good enough for his podcast and stuff. So I'm being sarcastic if you haven't figured that out. That's funny. How often do I see an ice machine microphone set too thick. When you say ice machine microphone, you're talking about the ice thickness sensor on the Manitowoc Indigo series machines, and it does use, the easiest way to explain it is a microphone. It listens to different frequencies. Yeah, they're constantly incorrectly set, but it's much better to be too thick than to be too thin for sure. So, because the machines can still make ice, it'll just be kind of hard for the customer to break it up and get it into a drink versus it not making any ice at all. Let's go through the chat. What was the scariest electrical mishap I have experienced working as a service technician? Oh, I mean, it's hard to say the absolute scariest one, but I've definitely seen a lot of strange things. Something that scared me, genuinely scared me, but once I figured it out, you know, it made more sense. But I was working at an old shopping mall in Lakewood, California. The Lakewood Mall, of all things. If anybody local knows, I was working at the Lakewood Mall and I was on the roof, and they have an old power distribution system feeding that shopping mall. And they have a Delta transformer feeding the shopping mall, but they have three-phase power. Now, if you try to pull three-phase power off of an older Delta transformer, you get a little something kind of strange, and it's called a corner-grounded Delta system. Very, very odd, because what happens, I was checking three-phase power, and I had three-phase power, right? 240 to ground. But line 1 to ground, I had voltage. Line 2 to ground, I think I had 0 volts. But then line 3 to ground, I had voltage. But then I was like, wait, what? 0 volts to ground on line 2? And then you go and check, and it may have been line 1, I can't remember. On the corner grounded Delta systems, when this happens, it's one specific line that it does it. But yeah, when you check from one leg to ground, you get 0 volts. And that one's kind of scary when you first see it the first time. I had to call an electrician friend of mine, and then he was like explaining it to me, and then I did a deep dive and a bunch of research on it. I have yet to see one of those systems since, because I don't work in older areas. But if you work in industrial areas, I've been told you'll see them a little bit, especially on older power systems. But yeah, that was a pretty interesting one, a corner grounded Delta. I'd encourage you all to go look at it and research it. It's rather interesting when you ever work on one. So let's see what else we got going on in the chat. 3 tips for building a good rapport with a new customer or manager. Honesty, honesty, honesty. Kill them with kindness. Even if they're being a jerk to you, be a cool back to them. Just, you know, you got to learn how to absorb passive aggressive behavior that oftentimes customers will give you. And just let it go. Just let it go and move on, and just give them facts and give them information. Be a cool person, and you'd be surprised how much they do appreciate you. You know, that's a really, really important thing. And it's just all about communication. Just be honest with them. Be upfront with them. Now, there is a gray area, and that's when it comes to explaining things to customers, because oftentimes you'll start to see their eyes glaze over as you're explaining things, and you have to kind of dumb it down a little bit, right? Sometimes you have to give them an explanation. So what I will do is, if I ever dumb down an explanation, I will start explaining to the customer, and the moment that I can see their eyes glaze over, I will say, I'm sorry, I did not mean to confuse you. Let me step this down and make it a little bit more understandable. Then I will dumb it down, and oftentimes, though, what I will say is, look, I'm going to explain it the best way that you can understand it, but I just need you to understand. How many times did I say understand? But I explain it the best way they can understand it, but I make sure that they know that the metaphors and different things I'm giving them aren't going to make sense to an electrician or a normal service technician, right? So if they go around and say, yeah, the guy said that, you know, like for instance, let me tell you this. When I used to have capillary tubes that would plug up on a 134A refrigeration system all the time. If you guys ever worked in the mid to late 90s, you dealt with a lot of 134A cap tube systems on restaurant refrigeration. It was very common, and the capillary tubes would plug up all the time. Why did the capillary tubes plug up? Because the customers were not doing proper preventative maintenance. They weren't maintaining their equipment enough. And oftentimes in restaurant kitchens, it can be very hot, and you need, you know, 70, 75 degree air going across that condenser. And if you have anything higher than that, what it starts to do is it starts to overheat the oil in the compressor, and the oil starts to break down, and it really starts to create problems. On top of that, it's polyester oil in the system, and polyester oil is kind of like a solvent. So if you don't follow proper refrigeration practices, it'll clean, you know, the crap that's in the system that you didn't properly, from you not properly brazing with nitrogen or something like that. But regardless, when I would explain to them why the capillary tubes would plug up, I would say, look, this is the basic understanding. I'll make it make sense to you. The oil in the system is now like bacon grease. When it cools, it gets thick, okay? And that was the analogy or whatever, metaphor, the way that I would describe to the customer what was happening to the oil in the system. Now, to you and I, when I say the oil is like bacon grease, that doesn't really make sense. But to a customer, that does make sense. So I'll try to talk to them in a way that they can understand, and they're like, oh, okay. And this happens because, you know, they're not maintaining their system enough, or they keep blocking the condenser inlet with a trash can or something like that. Okay, so that's another good tip for customers, is learn how to talk on their level, but you don't want to make it seem like you're being condescending. That's another area that you have to be careful in, because you don't want to go in there and pretend and act like the customer's just a complete idiot. You know, you don't want to talk to them and make them feel like you know, you're not even trying with them. So it's a delicate balance for sure. All right, let's see what else we got going here. Reading through the chat. VRF, like it or not, is the future. And I'm assuming you're talking because there was a conversation about VRF going on in the chat before the stream started. I agree that VRF is becoming more and more commonplace of some sort. I don't know if the VRF that we see today is necessarily going to be the same VRF we see in the future. Variable refrigerant flow, or VRV, which is Daikin's way of saying variable refrigerant flow. VRV, I think, is variable refrigerant volume or something like that. But same concepts, you know. When you're dealing with VRF and VRV systems, they have the ability to do heat recovery, different things like that. They have inverter-driven compressors, electronic expansion valves. I do believe that the future is going to be more electronic components. It's kind of a bummer, though, because we're a little bit behind the times with our technology here in the United States. We're getting better and better. But sometimes it takes a little bit longer for us to adopt new trends, new standards, new technologies. You know, other countries tend to jump on board with them. I'm not saying that they're better than us or anything like that, but you tend to see some of the new technologies. One thing I will say is just a comment or something that I notice is I get a lot of correspondence and communication with people from European countries, and they watch the videos, they comment on them. And, you know, both ways, right? Here in the United States, we'll tend to talk down on other countries. You'll hear people constantly saying that this country is horrible because of this, or that country is horrible because of that. Hey, you know what? I'm so sick of everybody talking down on everybody. Just let it be. Everybody's different, right? But it is, one thing I will say is kind of funny is that all of the sudden the United States has gotten really behind the times on regulations and on energy efficiency and even on climate related stuff. Now, not getting political or anything like that, but it used to be that we were at the forefront. We were the country that was instituting climate restrictions and doing different things to try to help the environment and all that stuff, right? But now it seems like other countries that used to be behind the times are jumping on board and instituting things well before we are. I think I recently read an article, and maybe someone in the chat can confirm if you're in anyone from in the European countries, but they're already talking about the phase down of R32 in some of the European countries, and yet R32 hasn't even become mainstream in the United States yet. So it's definitely kind of interesting how we all kind of have give and takes on when we're going to adopt new technology, when we're going to come out with something new. Yeah, just my 2 cents, right? All right, let's see what else we got going on in the chat. Just changed a compressor, Zach Cody says, on a Mitsubishi VRF. Took 8 hours to recover 186 pounds. Boy, oh boy. Now, when you're recovering 186 pounds, are you doing the push-pull method? How are you doing that? I mean, is there a better way to speed it up? Are you using normal gauges, or are you going to large diameter hoses? I have no idea. I'm sure you'll respond, but it might not be hard, or it might be difficult for me to see the response. But I would encourage everybody out there, when you're doing evacuations and recovery, whether you're evacuating the system to get ready to charge it or whether you're recovering refrigerant, start really thinking about ways that you can speed that up. Lower the temperature of the tank that you're transferring the refrigerant into. Take out the Schrader cores, use large diameter hoses, just that kind of stuff. Same thing with evacuations too. It'll definitely help to speed up your process. So let's see what we got going on in the chat. All right, I got a couple things I want to talk about. So Cody had asked me a question, and he said, hey, I believe I'm paraphrasing what Cody had asked me, but he said he's just getting ready to start his business, and he wanted to know if I had any advice. So he said specifically, what's one piece of advice that I would give a new business owner, okay, or someone that's getting ready to go into business? And, that's a pretty loaded question because there's a lot of stuff that different business owners need to know. But one really good piece of advice that I'm going to give a business owner, doesn't matter what trade you're in, right? Because this applies to all of them, is know your craft, right? There's two things that you thoroughly need to understand if you're going to become a business owner. You need to understand the technical aspects, the ins and outs of what your business is going to sell, okay? And you need to understand all the business aspects of how to run your business so that way you can price yourself correct and stay profitable. I've seen it too many times where, and this is a trend that is happening right now. And if anybody out there is doing this, I apologize. Don't take offense to what I'm saying, but this does bother me, okay? When you go to trade school is just giving you the fundamentals of your education. Trade school in no way is going to teach you everything. It doesn't matter what trade you go to. Hands-on, real-world experience is part of your training, and it will happen typically after your trade school. Then you go in and you work in the field for a couple years. You really get the ins and outs of your craft. Then you can start learning about business and focusing on that and then jumping headfirst in. But you need to have a thorough understanding of the business aspect, and you need to have a thorough understanding of the technical aspect of your craft. That would be the best advice that I can give to any business owner out there. Don't sell yourself short. Don't be the cheapest guy out there. Know your worth very much. That's very important, okay? So I'm going to cross that question off the list, and I got a few more that I'm going to get to. So Robert had a really good question. So Robert asked that he had two questions, and the first one was he was told that fan cycle switches are not necessary on ice machines if they already have a head pressure control valve. All right, so let's unpack this one. So ice machines, remote ice machines, typically have a head pressure control valve and a fan cycle switch. You will typically see this on the remote systems that are meant to operate in really low ambient conditions and that use some sort of hot gas or cool vapor to help harvest the ice off of the evaporator when it's time to harvest it. So his question is, someone told him that there's no need for the fan cycle switch if you have a head pressure control valve. And I would say there is some truth in that, but the manufacturer designed it to work a certain way. So if you cut a low ambient control out of the system, i.e. a fan cycle control, something's got to give, right? Something's going to happen. Why did the manufacturer put a fan cycle switch and a head pressure control valve? Well, I can speak on behalf of Manitowoc Ice Machines because I do a lot of work on their CVD, which is the cool vapor defrost machines, right? And on the CVD machines, they take cool vapor off the top of the receiver. And they use that to run across the evaporator. Now, on some of their other machines, they take hot gas and they run it across. And when we are using cool vapor or when we are using hot gas, we need that refrigerant temperature to be as high as it can because we need that refrigerant temperature to help break the vacuum and to help melt the ice. Actually, not to break the vacuum, but to help melt the ice off of the evaporator. So in some situations, yeah, you can probably get away with cutting the fan cycle switch out of the picture. But in other situations, you're not going to. You need all that heat that they can try to artificially create in the system by shutting off the condenser fan motor and by backing up the refrigerant in the condenser and essentially reducing the space of the condenser internally, so that way it drives up the head pressure, drives up the discharge line temperatures, drives up the liquid temperatures, and helps to harvest the ice off of the evaporator of the ice machine. And that same thing can apply all the way across the board. If it came from the manufacturer with a component in there, for the most part, it's meant to operate with that component in the system. And if you take it out, something's going to give, right? For some reason, something's going to happen. Now, I'm not going to say I've never cut factory components out of a system because they weren't necessary. I've certainly done it, but I'm taking a risk when I do that. I'd highly encourage you to leave the fan cycle switch on that machine, even if it has a head pressure control valve, because they need that extra refrigerant for the efficiency of the machine. I mean, they need that temperature of the refrigerant, the higher temperature, to help maintain the system's efficiency. Hopefully that helps a little bit, okay? Let me see what I got going in the chat. See what else we got in here. Isolation valves should definitely be a must with any VRF that is larger in size. 2 to 3 heads, okay, fine. 15 to 30 should definitely have ISO valves. Oh, 100%. I can give you a story of a parallel refrigeration system at a local college to me that I went out on behalf of the manufacturer. I can say it. It was the manufacturer was Hvacr. And I used to do a lot of work for Hvacr. They've since been bought up by Illinois Tool Works, which owns Trolson. It's this whole thing. But Hvacr had me go out on a install that they had someone else do on behalf of them, and they were having a lot of problems with it. And so I went out there and I had a bad expansion valve on one of their reach-in coolers. This is a tiny, I don't know, 7,000 BTU. No, not even that. Yeah, maybe a 7,000 BTU piece of equipment. Just a tiny little reach-in cooler with a cold rail on the top. And it had a plugged-up TXV. So I asked the customer, because I hadn't been on the roof yet, and I said, hey, where's the condensing unit? They said, oh, it's all on the roof. And I go up there, and there's a giant refrigeration rack on the roof. So I open up the rack, and it's a giant parallel rack, meaning that you have 2 compressors that are piped in parallel. They have oil return lines, they have oil separators, and basically the compressors never shut off in a nutshell. They always run, but it doesn't just run that reach-in, it runs the entire building. So you've got like 3 or 4 walk-in coolers, you have like 10 to 15 reach-in coolers. They were running all that off of the same refrigeration rack on the roof, and it makes sense, right? Well, when I went to go change that expansion valve, I had no way to pump the system down without shutting down the entire building, because they installed not one isolation valve on any pieces of equipment. So they did the entire install of the building, and you probably have a mile or 2 of piping, right? There's a lot of refrigerant. So I had to schedule with the customer. They had to set everything up, and I had to shut down the entire rack, pump all that refrigerant into the receiver and the condenser of the refrigeration rack, which was multiple walk-ins, multiple reach-ins, to change 1 quarter-ton expansion valve on a reach-in cooler. So I went ahead and talked to the customer, talked to the manufacturer Hvacr that I was working on, got approved to install isolation valves. Now, I did not install isolation valves on everything because I was just there on behalf of the manufacturer. But I did install isolation valves on that particular reach-in, and then I told the customer they need to get their contractor out to install isolation valves on everything. So in that situation then, and it was a good idea that I installed those isolation valves, because they also, since they didn't install isolation valves, another thing they didn't do was they didn't braze with nitrogen. So when I did pump that system down to change that expansion valve, I pulled the dryer out. It had a double core dryer. I pulled both cores out, and I was pulling handfuls of, brazing materials, because nobody brazed with nitrogen whenever they were doing the entire system. I mean, I was just pulling handfuls out of the dryer core or the dryer shell. So then I put the new dryer cores in there, put it all back together, and then like less than a week later, that TXV plugged up again because something got stuck in it. And what we ended up doing was we closed the isolation valves. We worked on just that reach-in, and then the manufacturer had me install a dryer at that specific reach-in instead of just using the dryers on the roof, because they realized that they just did a massive bad install, basically. And it was all because they didn't follow proper practices. They didn't install isolation valves, and it was just a giant dumpster fire, basically. See what else we got going on in the chat right now. What temperature should a walk-in freezer with meat run at? Well, Rick, Y4, Ricky 4, it really depends on what you're keeping in there. I know you said meat, but I mean, it just depends. You know, is it a special kind of meat? You know, every single type of meat has different densities and you don't want to dry them out. You don't want to do certain things. But for the most part, if you're keeping just meat, 0 degrees should be more than enough for a walk-in freezer. But if you're keeping ice cream in the walk-in freezer, you typically want to run it down to about -10, depending on if you want to be able to scoop that ice cream. So at -10, ice cream is going to be rather firm. It's not going to be rock solid, but it's going to be pretty firm, and it's going to be kind of difficult to scoop. If you maintain like -5, it'll be completely scoopable ice cream. But oftentimes, most customers, at least in the restaurants, want to keep it at about -10, so that way their ice cream stays nice and firm. But there's other things inside walk-in freezers that pizza doughs, certain pizza doughs need to be kept at certain temperatures when they're frozen and different things like that. So something that I want to get to, let me cross this one off the list, and this is going to segue into something. So I wanted to talk today about manuals from manufacturers. So this is the Heatcraft Engineering Manual, and this is the Russell Refrigeration Engineering Manual. Both of these are great manuals. Now, I have to tell you, I can remember being, I don't know, in my early 20s and going to a supply house, and I loved training materials. I loved books, right? And I went into the supply house one time, and they had this with all their pamphlets and all their flyers, and it was free for everybody. It was the Heatcraft Refrigeration Manual. Now, it was the print. Now, I printed this out on my printer, but it was the bound copy, and it was, I thought I found gold, because these things are so interesting to read when you want to learn. If you guys want to learn how to size refrigeration lines, right? It's in the engineering manuals. It's in the Russell Engineering Manual. I highly suggest that you guys download these. Now, these are all older manuals, but I still like looking at them. But in the same thing, they have all kinds of product information in these right here. And it tells you the relative humidity that you should keep apricots at, that you should keep Brussels sprouts at. It has all that information and tells you how to properly size your equipment so that way you can maintain the proper temperatures, the proper humidity levels. I highly encourage everybody out there, when you come across these manuals, save them, keep them, and just put them in a shelf, and they become so handy later in life. Look at this one, the little handy tips. I was going through my little books over here. This is the Sporlan little handy tips. It has a couple questions in here. What's a split condenser? It explains it. It explains what a balanced port expansion valve is, why you should have it. It's a little pocket manual. Where should the TEV bulb be located, right? All these different information, these little pamphlets, I loved these things. So when I go into supply houses, now it's becoming far and few between with supply houses that actually have printed materials anymore, but when you can get your hands on them, grab them. They're great resources to have, okay? Couple other really, really awesome ones, and I encourage you guys all to do it. Sporlan has tech bulletins, right? This one's on filter dryers and catch-all cores, right? Very important. This is Bulletin 40-10. This is a great, great manual. Refrigeration distributors. Do you want to understand more about the different types of distributors? In fact, when we're talking about distributors, Brett and Kevin from the Advanced Refrigeration Podcast just actually did a podcast on distributors where they discuss the different types. You've got Venturi style distributors, regular style distributors that accept a nozzle. You have distributors that have an extra line for hot gas defrost. There's all kinds of great information that you find in these Sporlan manuals. This is Bulletin 20-10. These are free, guys. You can download these. Anytime you're at a supply house, ask them if they have any to give you, or ask them for if you ever see a Sporlan rep, ask them, do you got any of these tech manuals? Thermostatic expansion valves, Bulletin 10-10. There's so much valuable information in these. But it's not just technical manuals, guys. Refrigeration research. They make vessels. They make receivers, right? Accumulators, all that different stuff. You guys would be so surprised to find out the valuable information in one of these books. This book right here. It's kind of silly, right? But when I need a receiver, I just open this up and I go, you know what? I need a 10-pound receiver that has a rotolock connection on the outlet only, the king valve side. Boom. Find it in this manual. Go to your supply house and say, I want this one, okay? Guys, I can't stress enough. Get these manuals. They help you so much. Something, you may not even know. Manufacturers produce this information, and oftentimes they don't do a good job telling people that they have it. True Manufacturing has a sequence of operation on their temperature controllers. Guys, this thing breaks down the different style temperature controllers, and it gives you part numbers, where sensors should be locating, troubleshooting advice, how to find it, the mechanical controls. It gives you cut out and cut in temperatures of mechanical controls. Hey, you know where that comes in handy? Let's say you're in a bind and you need to buy an aftermarket temperature controller. Well, how do you know if the new one that you can find is going to replace the one that you need, right? Right here, it tells you the cut in and cut out temperatures with their part numbers of the temperature controllers. It just takes a little effort. People ask me all the time, how do you become a better technician? Ask questions, research, be inquisitive. Guess what? Years back, I wanted a bunch of these manuals for my employees. And I went to the supply house and they're like, we don't really bring those manuals in anymore. And I said, cool, call the manufacturer and order me 6 of them. I had 6 employees, including myself at the time. I said, I want copies for all my guys. I don't care what it costs. I paid for them. That's fine. I don't mind paying for something like that because it helps us become better technicians. It's so important, okay? So I encourage everybody out there, find the manuals, save them. You can download it. If you're the kind of person that doesn't like a paper manual, now I'm old school. I still really like holding something in my hand, but I'm getting better and better at accepting the fact that we can download PDFs on almost all this stuff for free. So find the PDFs. Go to all the manufacturers' websites. If you want to know how to work on a Hoshizaki ice machine, HoshizakiAmerica.com. I think it's HoshizakiAmerica.com. Yeah, I think so. And then you can download all their technical bulletins, ManitowocIce.com. All the different ice machine manufacturers, they have their tech bulletins on their websites for free. Download them, print them out, go to town. Toby Overton says that the AE Bulletins app has everything. It definitely does. Copeland Emerson or Emerson Copeland has great apps out there. They have the AE Bulletins app that tells you all the technical bulletins. You've got the cross-reference app. I think they consolidated a lot of those. The Copeland mobile app, I think, has the cross-reference stuff in it now. But yeah, lots of great information. How did I find out about all this information? I just got curious and started searching on the internet. You can just start looking around. Go to the app stores once a month and just type in a few keywords in the app stores. HVAC, HVACR, refrigeration, ice machines, air conditioners. In the app store, you'd be surprised all the different apps that apply. That's how I found apps, was just looking in the app store. Hey, I didn't know that Browning made an app. Did you know that? Browning, the belt manufacturer, the bearing manufacturer, they have an app, and it has all kinds of great information about sizing pulleys, about sizing belts, about tension on belts. Just got to download the app. There's so much information out there. Just got to look for it. That's all. Let's see what else. If people knew how to read nowadays, someone once told me manuals are for chumps and wonder why new installs fail. 100%. Now, Mikey Tech Talk, I will say that, I can even be a stubborn dummy sometimes too, and kind of cowboy things together, and then usually get humbled really quick when I realize I made a mistake. So, we're all human. We all make mistakes. I think one of the more important things that we can, and I'm not here to talk to you guys about philosophy and all that different stuff, but I do give little tips here and there. If we just be a little more kind to one another and be a little more understanding, yeah, you know what? That guy on social media posted a picture of his horrible install, and yeah, he screwed a lot of things up. But there's 2 ways you can go at that guy, right? You can go at him with like, you're the biggest idiot in the world. I can't believe you did that. You ripped your customer off. You're belittling him, okay? But nothing's going to happen except for you're going to get a little bit of a dopamine release because you were a jerk to him. Or you can go at him in a private message, not in a public form. Just DM him and just say, hey, bro, I'm not trying to be rude, but I see a bunch of stuff that's kind of messed up, and you can actually run into some problems. And have a conversation with the guy. You know what? He may not accept your criticism, right? It's constructive criticism. You don't have to be a jerk, but maybe he does, and maybe he grows from that. So instead of just bashing people because they have a horrible install, and guys, I'm just as guilty of it. I will say, I see a post on social media, and sometimes my gut is to put something in there, and then I'm like, wait a minute. Who's going to benefit but me from that? I'm going to get a quick dopamine release because I was the first person to tell this guy he was an idiot. And I've done it. I have done it. Okay. I'm not some perfect person. But then I realized and I felt bad and I started to feel guilty. And so I stopped doing that. And, you know, even if I think something is silly, I'll just stop for a few minutes and think about it. And then I'll private message the person and just be like, hey, I don't mean to be rude, but I can give you a little bit of advice. Here's some things, some mistakes that you made. And I try to help the person. So I think there's a lot of that going on right now where people just bash people instead of trying to help and be constructive. Social media has the ability, and it has done a great job at excelling this trade. This trade has jumped leaps and bounds in the last couple of years simply because of social media. So social media has good sides to it too, but it's really easy for people on social media just to attack the world and pretend like they're on a high horse and they've never made a single mistake in their life. I have learned from my mistakes, and I hope that all of you guys do too. And I hope that you guys can go out there and help other people. Try to help them. And I know there's a lot of people in this chat right now that I know for a fact help people all the time out of the kindness of their hearts. Okay. So now that I went off on a total tangent, let's see what else we got on here. All right. Robert also asked me a question about on-site managers. So Robert has worked in the restaurant side of things for a while on walk-in freezers and walk-in coolers, and he wanted my opinion. Is it really beneficial for a manager to shut a walk-in freezer or a walk-in cooler off when they are loading a delivery? And 100% it is beneficial, okay? It's actually going to hurt their food more if you do not shut the equipment off. Number one, if they're doing a product delivery, they're going to have the box open for more than 5 minutes. It is in their best interest to shut off the evaporator and shut off the condenser. Now, if they don't, there's a possibility that it won't freeze up and that it will recover and everything will be okay. But something else that you're doing is if you're leaving an evaporator fan motor running while you have a door propped open, you're bringing heat into the box. You're speeding up the heat transfer process. If you shut off the equipment and just simply open the door for a few minutes and bring a bunch of product in and then, you know, put it where it needs to go, then turn the equipment back on, you're going to start circulating that air again. But if you're circulating the warm air while leaving the door open, you're drawing in more outside air and you're going to speed up the heat absorption of the product inside there. So not only are you running the risk of freezing the box up or freezing the equipment up, but then you're accelerating the food temperature rising faster. So yeah, it is in your best interest to shut off the equipment if they're going to have a door open for more than 5 minutes. 100% I agree that walk-in freezers and walk-in coolers, especially though walk-in freezers, it's so important because with the temperatures of the box, you're going to get frost accumulation. It's just going to be a problem. So put a load switch in there, something like that the customer can flip a switch. But here's the one thing I tell my customers. I try to instruct them to shut equipment off as much as possible. If they don't have like a twist timer on the wall or something like that, I always tell the managers, please don't show the staff how to shut the equipment off. Because what happens, in my experience, if you have a kitchen and you have a cook that is in charge of loading the box, because that'll often happen, and the manager shows the cook how to turn the equipment off at the breaker panel or something like that, that cook's going to finish his day and he's going to go home and he's going to forget to turn that breaker back on. And then the manager is going to go home. And then the next manager is going to come in and he has no idea someone shut it off. So then they're going to place a service call and I'm going to go out there and turn a switch on. So I encourage management only to turn equipment off, because then you tend to have someone a little bit more responsible, not necessarily the most responsible person in the world, but for the most part, you hope that the manager is more responsible than the kitchen staff, right? So just a food for thought in my mind. All right, that's that. Let me cross that one off. So I did a YouTube short a while back, and I showed a little trick where I shoved, I don't know if it was insulation. I think I shoved a towel into a hole saw, and then I soaked the towel in oil. There's a couple different methods that I will do, and I got a lot of criticism. People saying, well, that's dumb. You should just use a carbide bit for drilling through stainless steel instead of wasting a Milwaukee all-purpose hole saw, okay? Well, and that's the thing. Like, guys, when I say this, I'm addressing these comments, and I'm not addressing them because I got my feelings hurt. I'm addressing them because I'm trying to tell people, stop bashing everybody. Like, people will bash me because I used a hole saw. Now, I don't care if someone bashes me. It is what it is. But the point I'm trying to make is, it's really easy for a keyboard warrior to say I should just use a carbide bit and not use my Milwaukee hole saw, but I don't think, understand what I'm drilling through. Now, I realize that my Milwaukee hole saw, or insert name of whatever brand all-purpose metal hole saw that I'm using, is not meant for stainless. I realize that. But if you're drilling through a stainless countertop, what a lot of people out there don't realize is that countertop is probably about 3.5 inches thick and has multiple layers of metal and multiple layers of foam insulation inside of it. So if you're using a carbide bit, you're going to be pulling a lot of crap out of there, and oftentimes the bit is not long enough. So a hole saw oftentimes will go through, but sometimes a hole saw won't even go through, so you have to drill a pilot hole on each side and then use the hole saw on both sides. But carbide bits aren't always something that work for me, okay? Now, I tend to use just a regular metal hole saw, and I can make them last for a long time. If you go low and slow and oil the bit and keep it cool, you'd be surprised how long I can make a hole saw last. Probably 6 to 8 months, going through multiple times of stainless steel. As long as you keep it cool and keep it low and slow, it'll last for a long time, okay? So the trick about shoving a towel in there and putting insulation on it, I actually learned that from my stainless steel shop. So I have a stainless steel shop that manufactures a lot of refrigeration equipment, and they make custom countertops. They make refrigerators for a lot of national chains and different things like that. And I do a lot of work there. And so I'd see the guys all the time. They would take fiberglass insulation and they would pack it inside the hole saw and then fill it with oil. And then the insulation would slowly release the oil, and that would cool the bit and keep it lubricated. And that's where I learned from, just watching those guys do it. I'm sure there's fancy hole saws that you can buy that are deep enough, that are carbide. I'm sure someone makes something like that, but oftentimes it's what we have available to us. So when I do break a hole saw, I can go over to Home Depot and buy one single hole saw. It cost me like $9, and then I use that for another 8 months, and then go buy another one. I don't have to buy some fancy bit that I have to go to some tooling shop to have them sell it to me. I buy things that are practical and that I can use and replace them easily. So let's see what else we got going on in here. HVACR North. Does the Queen allow Mario in Canada? Canada. That's Brett. Oh, so if you guys don't know, HVACR North is my buddy Joe. He lives up in Canada. I'm sure you guys know about the HVAC Overtime show, but if you don't, search HVAC Overtime on YouTube. If you get your feelings hurt, if you don't like bad words, if you are sensitive to people being rude or talking like that, I'd highly suggest that you don't check out the HVAC Overtime show. Yeah, it's definitely a polar opposite of what you get from this stream, which is more straight-laced, clean cut. The Overtime show is literally like a bunch of dudes that are 3 beers in at the bar, just kind of no filter. That's what we are like on the HVAC Overtime show. But if you like that kind of stuff, go check it out for sure, okay? Let's see what else we got going on in the chat. All right, we're good on that. Okay, I'm going to go through my list. I already talked about that. Another tip that I gave recently on a recent video was a toothbrush. If you do a lot of ice machine work, I highly encourage you to keep a couple toothbrushes, clean ones, of course, inside your van. Those are great resources when you're working on some of these ice machines and getting in weird places. Just grab a little toothbrush, put a little ice machine cleaner on it. You can scrub in some really cool little places. It's a cool little tip to use. Adam had asked me how long I would quote to clean a Hvacr ice machine. It really depends on the size, the location. There's a lot of variables that go in. But for the most part, for a single Hvacr ice machine, if I had to give a blanket quote on it, it would be 4 hours. Typically 4 to 6 hours, depending on the severity of the location. Do I have to take all the ice out of the bin myself? How big is the bin? Is there 2 machines? It's going to change things. But for the most part, 4 to 6 hours is what I'm going to quote for most of the ice machines out there to do a proper cleaning. I realize that if you open an ice machine's manual, it tells you can clean the machine in 20 minutes. I love going to ice machine training classes and politely challenging the technical trainer from the ice machine company when they're talking about how quick you can clean their ice machines. I'll just, hey, I can really clean your ice machine in 20 minutes. Taking every single hose off, soaking them in ice machine cleaner, pulling the dump valve, pulling the water inlet valve, pulling the pump out, cleaning, sanitizing, scrubbing, emptying the ice out of the bin. Well, no, that takes a lot longer. Okay. So a lot of these ice machine manufacturers, part of their marketing strategy is to make their ice machines different from the competitors. And they will often say, you can clean our ice machines in by pushing one button, pouring the cleaner in there and walking away, and it'll start making ice when you're done. No, that it's not that easy, because an ice machine, to clean an ice machine, you don't just pour cleaner in it and push a clean button. You got to take it apart. You got to scrub it. You got to wipe it down. There's a lot more that goes into it. So typically 4 to 6 hours is what I'm going to take to clean an ice machine. Let me see. What am I missing in the chat right now? You're three bottles of Jack in. That's funny. If pineapples or bumped uplings offend you, tune in. Your ass will be chapped like the Mojave Desert in the summer. That's right, Jason Johnson. 100%. Don't get your feelings hurt. For real. All right? Let's see what else I got going on in the chat. I'm reading through here right now. Pennsylvania AC Productions. Thank you so very much for that super chat, man. It is very awesome. I really do appreciate the support. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Let's see what else we got in here. Reading through. It's funny that the worst keyboard warriors never show their work. That is very true. Very, very true. What causes the inverter AC to defrost with the fan running? Pennsylvania AC Productions. That's a good question, bud. There's a lot of variables that are going to go into that, and I don't know on that particular model that you're working on. But yeah, to defrost with the fan running. Yeah, that is really interesting, but I'm sure there's a reason why they're doing it. But yeah, I don't know for sure. Let's see what else we got going on in the chat. Reading through here. New evaporators blow through the evaporator frontward. I'm assuming you're talking about something else. I see a comment up there. So Jason Johnson said Contra for NES. That was one of my favorite games on Nintendo for sure. It's funny because I just recently, I feel like a silly old man or something because I bought a PlayStation, right? But whatever. I know a lot of people like gaming. I've just never been a gaming person because they make me nauseous and I can't play many games. But I bought a PlayStation and I got Gran Turismo, like the newest one or whatever, because I used to have Gran Turismo for PlayStation 1. That was one of my favorite games. And I've given myself a time limit. I spend about an hour to 45 minutes to an hour each day, and I play Gran Turismo. I love it. It's kind of fun. I like playing racing games, but I can only play it for so long until I start getting nauseous. So, but yeah, I like playing video games for sure. The old ones especially. I can't play shooter games though because first person just really messes with my head. What would trip a GFI when cleaning a condenser? Man, GFIs are really tricky and finicky. So, it really depends on what you got wet. Do you have any loose grounds? Is it not making a good connection? If you're cleaning a condenser, your best bet is to shut the equipment off completely. Make sure that you're not saturating a motor. You're not saturating electrical components with any kind of water. If your GFI is tripping after you cleaned a condenser, then something got wet. The potential for an electrical short got high enough that the GFCI actually caught it before it shorted and potentially electrocuted someone. So the GFCI was actually doing its job. So, let's see. Oh, GoldenEye, 100% on Nintendo. What is it? Nintendo 360? Well, yeah, wasn't it like Nintendo 360 or something like that? I don't know what it was, but whatever GoldenEye was on, yeah, 100% liked GoldenEye too. GoldenEye was the first person shooter. That was the first one that I ever got into for sure. And yeah, GoldenEye was a fun one. To be fair, you bought an Xbox, you're in a similar situation. Yeah, it's just fun. I actually need to find some people. I need to get one of those fancy gaming headsets with a microphone, and I need to find some people to play Gran Turismo with me. Let's see what else. Jason Johnson says a neutral issue. Very good possibility on why the GFCI is tripping. Yeah, there's something. Something's loose. Something got wet. Something's going on. Nintendo 64, that's right. Yeah, for sure. All right, cool. All right, I'm going to read through here real quick, see if I'm missing anything in the chat. All right, GFCI's tripping is a big issue on Charleston vertical reach-ins. You use a shop vac to pull the water from the bottom of the coil as you spray. Toby. So yeah, 100%, I run into that problem too. What actually happens on the Charleston units is the door switch, for the most part, is the thing that causes the biggest problems. So whenever you're cleaning an upright refrigerator or freezer that has a condenser, what I would highly suggest you do is, first off, if the customer's not doing routine maintenance, it's going to make a mess, okay? Go grab some metal pans, 2 of them, stack them together, put them under the front of the box so that way the box has a slight pitch going back. Clean the condenser so the water runs completely off the back, especially on the Charlestons. Put a bunch of dry towels in front of the condenser. Dry everything up as best as possible, then take the pans out, the box will level out, and even then you're going to see residual water coming down the front of the box. But oftentimes it will get into the walls and then seep down into there, and the door switch, the insulation around the door switch will get wet, and it'll cause the GFCIs to trip all the time, 100%. You can get in there, I can't remember what color wire it is. Might be the pink wires up in the electrical box or whatever. If you ever have one that's constantly tripping the GFCI, just disconnect the door switch temporarily and then plug it back in. And if it doesn't trip, then you know it's the door switch. But the door switches on the Charlestons are notorious for getting wet. All right, reading through here. Let's see. Oh, Cyborg saying we should play. Yeah, I'm sure we'll figure something out one of these days. That'd be kind of cool. All right. Was it my buddy Gil in here? What's up, Gil? How you doing, man? I'm looking forward to seeing you in a couple months, right? I'm sure we're going to hang out at AHR for sure. Grab a beer or something like that. Gil with HVAC Uncensored. Cool dude. Definitely. I know I'll be hanging out with Gil and Scott for sure. Scott, HVAC rookie. Cool dudes for sure. All right, let's see. Do I ever play Sonic or Doom? No, I'm really not into video games. The only video game right now I am playing is Gran Turismo, and I still don't even really know how to do that very well. It's just kind of like numbs my brain for a while. Even a light socket getting wet will trip it too. Yeah, 100%. Let me see. Sweet. What Southern California company is a good one? Eddie Berto, I don't know, man. Depends on what area you're in, what kind of work you want to do. Feel free to shoot me an email, hvacrvideos@gmail.com. You know, I can probably help you a little bit more there. So, all right. For sure, we're going to have some fun at AHR. Are you going to AHR, Will? Are you going? Because I'm looking forward to it if you're going, for sure. But AHR is going to be in Atlanta. Are you going up to Atlanta, or are you just referencing what I said? Get him a bigger pickle. It will be in the bag. That's funny, Joe. That is too funny. 1905 water heater. Isn't that a bucket and a cast iron stove? Right on. Lots of great conversations always going on in here. All right, everybody. So something that I am going to be doing next week. Tentatively, we have a really, really cool guest. One of my favorite educators out there is going to be on the show. Got some kinks to work out and stuff. We're going to be talking about some new cool topics. And I think that this is going to be the start of something new on my channel. Just a new way to kind of tweak things and make it a little more interesting in me, or with me. And we did kind of officially announce it too, that Bill, Curious HVAC guy, and myself are currently planning on doing some sort of a light commercial refrigeration podcast, HVAC kind of stuff, just with what we do, because Bill does a lot of restaurant work like myself. So we're going to do some sort of a light commercial podcast kind of a thing. That'll be something that we're planning on doing here. And I'm not putting a timetable on that. It's going to take some time. I got a lot of fires burning right now, and I got to put those out before I get involved in too much more. But stay tuned, because that will be coming. What's my opinion on Carrier? I mean, you know what? Every brand has problems. Every brand is good at different times, and it all depends on the installation. Everybody is having supply chain shortage issues and having problems with quality control and different things like that. So I'm not going to say that Carrier is any worse than Lennox, Trane, York, insert name of whatever manufacturer. They all have problems right now. So let me see. You will see me there. Important to remember, a GFI compares the current going out on the hot and coming back on the neutral. If there's even a 6 milliamp difference, the GFI will trip. Good point. That would be awesome. You barely work on the type of equipment. Right on, man. The roof, yes, it is. Supervisor and you are going on your own dime. Ooh, interesting. That'll be nice. Well, definitely if you're going to be at AHR, Mike, you know for sure you're going to be able to find me at the Sporlin booth at some point. You're going to be able to find me at some point at the Heatcraft refrigeration booth. You're going to be able to find me at the Refrigeration Technologies booth. And I'm sure there'll be some other ones. I'll be doing some podcasts with people at AHR, bunch of different stuff. That'll be in January or February in Atlanta. Just look it up, AHR 2023. You'll find all that information. What's my opinion on LED light bulbs? Oh, I got a bunch of them in my office. Yeah, I don't really have an opinion on them. Let's see what else we got going on in here. All right, cool. Well, I'm going to wrap this up. I really, really do appreciate y'all. Thank you so very much for coming in. If you haven't already, please consider checking out my website. It's a great way to help support the channel. There's some merchandise you can purchase on there. The easiest way to support the channel, as I always say, is simply just watch the videos. That's really the easiest way to support it. But thank you all so very much. Be kind to one another. Be good humans. Remember, you never know what the other person's going through. So just, give them a break. They could be having a bad day. You never know what just happened in their life. It's not justifying them being a jerk, but times are crazy right now, and everybody's so quick to judge. So just give people a break and try to relax on the chaos that's going on in the world these days, okay? I'm going to cue up the outro music, and we will catch you on the next one.